Thank you, Tom. Great. All right, thank you. We founded in 2004 as a land trust. It grew out of the Smith River Project, which founded in 1999, specifically to protect the inholdings surrounded by the Smith River National Recreation Area. That morphed into Siskiyou Land Conservancy, a bigger organization, in 2004. But before that, people told us, we really would appreciate it as we're working on the inland areas of the Smith River if you wouldn't mind looking at the estuary and the pesticide situation there. So as I get into that, let me take you to the Smith River as a whole first. And the first part of that is to look at the Klamath-Siskiyou bioregion, which, according to Klamath-Siskiyou Wildland Center, which we very much like, contains the largest concentration of intact watersheds and roadless wildlands left on the Pacific coast of the United States. It's about a 10 million acre ecosystem, and it goes from sea level to 7,533 feet, and more than half of it is in public lands. It's a somewhat legendary place. The Klamath Knot book is about this area. Here's another look at the Klamath-Siskiyou bioregion and the Klamath River running right through the middle of it. And significant watersheds that are in California and in the Klamath-Siskiyou bioregion are the Trinity River and the Salmon River, which is about the same size as the Smith River and also undammed, part of the Klamath system. It's not quite as pristine, but it's still a wonderful river, and I love it very much. And then here is the Smith River, really anchoring the coastal heart of the Klamath-Siskiyou bioregion, and the most pristine river in the bioregion, and one of the most pristine rivers in the 49 states. Here's a closer look. This map is a little, the Marble Mountains are incorrect. That's actually the Siskiyou Mountains. So let's look at the Smith River watershed, just kind of get oriented a little bit. It's always a good thing when you're talking about watersheds. Here's the main stem, little bitty main stem there, just on this picture. And here's the South Fork. There's three main forks: South Fork, Middle Fork, and the North Fork. This is Rowdy Creek. We're going to be talking quite a bit about Rowdy Creek. Rowdy Creek and Mill Creek are the two primary salmonid streams on the Smith River. Salmonid being salmon and steelhead, that anadromous fish go out to the ocean and come back. Also cutthroat trout, although cutthroat run way up the main stem all over the Smith, a little more versatile, and they do not go out to the ocean. These are anadromous fish streams that are very important. At the North Fork, Siskiyou Land Conservancy owns 80 acres of rare plant habitat. We'll be looking at that. And on the South Fork, we protect 148 acres through a conservation easement, a private parcel there that we'll also look at that is really spectacular. In fact, we're going to look at that one first. And here's what it looks like from a ridge that runs through the middle of the property. We're looking down at the flat. There is about half the property is flat. It's the largest flat expanse on private lands on the South Fork of the Smith River. There are some very unusual seasonal wetlands on the property, and meadows, and Oregon white oak. There's a very nice Oregon white oak grove, and the easternmost redwoods on the Smith River. So we get a lot with this property by protecting it. Here's part of the white oaks in the fall. They're spectacular trees. One of the issues with the white oak is that the seedlings are not getting to grow due to deer browse and competition from the meadow. So we're working with the National Resource Conservation Service and developing a plan to fence off the seedlings, a bunch of them, and get them to grow into maturity so the deer can't get them all, or else the white oaks will just go away on this property. The redwoods, some of them are quite spectacular. It's all second growth, but it's a lot of mature second growth on the property. Very beautiful, including in the forest, but also alongside the meadows. But a lot of the property looks like this. It's about 60 to 70 acres of very tightly clustered second growth fir regeneration with almost 100% closure in the canopy, which means that no light can get through, and this tree's almost stopped growing. And it's just a disaster in terms of the forest. It'll eventually recover, but we're helping it out a little, again, with NRCS. We're doing a lot of thinning from underneath to prevent catastrophic fire and also just improve the health of the forest. And it just makes it a lot nicer. It's a wonderful thing to be out there and be able to bring a little fire back. Even though these are piles, we hope to do some broadcast burning as well. And here's one of our volunteers from Humboldt State University. We've had a couple of crews out there, 3 crews from Humboldt State, and we have another one coming up. We do quite a bit of work out there with them, and we're very grateful for the Natural Resources Club and CCAT who came out. And I got to thank Bobby for correcting me. I was calling this a calypso orchid. It is a coral root orchid, and this came back in an area where we had done some clearing from underneath, and we hadn't seen these there before. So they may have been there. We maybe missed them, but a lot of stuff comes back, including birds, when you open up the canopy a little bit. And some wild irises came in. Some beautiful flowers on this property. There's 4 kinds of ferns: sword fern, bracken fern, maidenhair, and woodwardia. Lots of huckleberry. It's beautiful, but it's also a little too thick, and we're clearing out some of that. And a beautiful Class 1 stream runs through the middle of the property, resident trout, and we found Pacific giant salamanders in there, and we're trying to devise ways to keep it from being a chute. It was one of those streams that was used as a roadbed, filled in the 50s and then went up it with a cat and logged. And this stream leads to about this spot, the swimming hole that we like to go to, down on the South Fork of the Smith. Now from here, I'm going to take you up the South Fork just for a little ways, or all the way really, but just for a little bit of time, where we go pool after pool and riffle and old growth forest and pristine South Fork of the Smith River. The Siskiyou Wilderness, only one side of the South Fork is protected in the Siskiyou Wilderness, but virtually all of it is due now to the Smith River National Recreation Area. Here's a little secret swimming hole that you never find it unless you just walked for miles up the river. And you can see the clarity of the water there. It's one of the cleanest rivers in the world, the Smith River. Further up the Kelsey Trail now, we're hiking up the Kelsey Trail, you get to Buck Creek. We're still not in the wilderness. This is an issue, that it's pristine, beautiful, wild Smith River country, Klamath-Siskiyou country, and it's not yet in the wilderness. You have to go another mile or so up from here to get in the wilderness. Along the way, you meet quite a few wildflowers. This is a toothwort, and of course, gooseberry, and there's a tiny trillium. I don't even know if it has a different name or what. Somebody in this room, I'll bet, does. And then further along the Kelsey Trail, you are in the wilderness, and you can see the snowy mountains in the background there. And we used to get a lot of snow, and I'm hoping it comes back. I mean, this is actually a little bit of a cheat. This is the Go Road on the Smith River side. But just to give you an idea of the amount of snow that used to fall, this is just a few years ago, and we haven't seen any snow like that, I think, in 3-4 years. So further up the South Fork, you get to Island Lake. The Siskiyou do not have a lot of lakes, but the ones they do are just spectacular and beautiful. And I turned around after taking this picture, and here's one of the rare lilies that grow throughout the Siskiyou and in the Smith River. And here's a view down the South Fork of the Smith River from near Island Lake. We're getting close to the ridge. Keep going along. This is actually not quite near there. This is the Blue Fire, the Smith River side of the Blue Fire. And, the fire is so good for the ecology if it's the right fire. And so this is bear grass. It's come back after a fire. And it's like a perfume factory. It's just the most incredible scent. These flowers are just odoriferous and wonderful. And you keep moving up the ridge until you get to the very top of the Siskiyou crest between the Klamath River and the Smith, where you find even more amazing flowers that are growing right out of the rocks. Spectacular wildflowers up here. This is all June. June and July, I believe, I shot all these. And there's, of course, columbine, which is this is taken at about 6,000 feet right here. So now let's go back down the South Fork. We're going to move back down the South Fork to about where the coastal influence ends, which again is on this property that we protect there. You can go up on the ridge and look at the fog coming in, and it stops right there. And then the redwoods stop right there. And you get it. It's really spectacular. So if you look at the very top of this picture, you can see some redwoods, and that's these same redwoods here at the mouth of Hurdy-Gurdy Creek. These are on private land. They're old growth. Some of them are huge. And we have been trying to work with the landowner to protect those, and hopefully someday we'll be successful. Further on down, the wild and scenic, beautiful Smith River. The Smith River has more miles in wild and scenic status than any other river in the United States. That's how much it has been appreciated. The level of protection is very high on the Smith, which is another reason for this presentation. And this presentation is actually a celebration of the Smith. When we get into the pesticides, it's not so happy pretty. Going down the South Fork, you get to the confluence. the Middle Fork and the South Fork, which is just spectacular. And you move up the Middle Fork from there, and you get to the North Fork, which runs here down into the Gasky area. And here is Stony Creek. It's the only roadless tributary to the North Fork. And here is the 80-acre property that we own there, which is at the confluence of Stony Creek and the North Fork. And again, it's a spectacular rare plant habitat. If you look here at this map, there is the 80 acres. Here is the North Fork coming down there. Here is the Middle Fork. And this is owned by California Department of Fish and Game, so this parcel is also protected. So most of that 200 acres out of the 240 is protected. And the rest, all north of that, all that green is the part of the Klamath-Siskiyou wildland. It's protected by the Smith River National Recreation Area. This is looking down to the property that we own there, 40 acres of old growth that goes up into the hills. And this is Stony Creek running through the middle of the property, as is this. And those are some nice old growth Port Orford cedar that are not affected by the root rot because there's no roads to this property. There's a half-mile trail, a Forest Service trail that leads to it. It's a botanist's paradise. People come from all over the world to see this area, part of the Josephine ophiolite soil structure, which makes it so all these weird ancient plants grow there, and a lot of them nowhere else, a lot of endemic plants. There are 70 endemic species, more than any other serpentine outcrop in North America. And several of them grow on our property, including the rare Baker's meadowfoam, the threatened Milo Baker's lupine, and the North Coast semaphore grass, all grow on the property. Also, all three of the carnivorous species that grow in this area, plant species, grow on the property. And we'll get to those in a second. But meanwhile, the North Fork you may know as a boater's paradise. And a lot of people go up there just for the boating, and they don't even know about the plants. But they might run across one of these Darlingtonia fens. This is one of the carnivorous species, a rather famous plant. And some of the finest Darlingtonia fens in the world are on the property that we purchased specifically to protect that property. Here's a Darlingtonia close up. The other carnivorous plants are the sundew. I don't have a photo of that, but here is the horned butterwort, which captures flies and insects in its sticky leaves, and there's the flowers. We have brought crews in to this property to cut back some of the encroaching brush because there's no fire anymore. One of the issues, it needs a fire. We haven't burned it, but we do bring in crews to cut back the brush that are encroaching on the rare plant habitat. And here's some of the other plants, another beautiful lily, and of course rhododendron, lots of insects in my plant photos. So we're going to leave the North Fork now, go back down the Middle Fork and hit the main stem, which is of course where a lot of people fish. The fishing industry in Del Norte County is very important. It's a multi-million-dollar industry, a lot of hotels, restaurants, gas stations, sporting goods shops, tackle shops rely on the Smith River fishing industry. And it's one of the most important industries on the North Coast. Moving down the main stem, if you're on that drift boat, you might go through Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park. And some of the finest, of course, old-growth redwood trees in the world. Steve Sillett thinks I haven't found them, but I have. And moving down in our drift boat, there's the Highway 199 bridge by Highway 197. And we continue on down until we get close to the estuary. This is one of our former interns, Doug Simpson, looking for New Zealand mud snails, until you get to the mouth of the Smith River. Where, when you get to the estuary, you understand what the challenges are for the Smith River. It's been leveed, and it's the most beleaguered reach of the Smith River. There's the diminishment of off-channel habitat, elimination of riparian shade. The agricultural inputs are huge, and we're going to get to that, but it's not just pesticides. And there's a lack of large woody debris. And as you can see, I don't know if you can tell, that's a cement truck. That's one of the things they use to build the levees with, along with a bunch of tires that are now just kind of strewn about down there. So let's take a look at the lower river. This is actually quite a bit of the river here, but we can see a lot of the features. Here is Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park, and there's 199 and 197. Of course, there's a very controversial road project for that, and you can, I encourage you to check that out. And here is Mill Creek, the most important anadromous stream on the Smith River. It runs through the middle of Jedediah Smith State Park. And here I have to give a shout out to Smith River Alliance, which does incredible work on rehabilitating a lot of these streams and also in getting a lot of the private lands that were surrounded by the Smith River National Recreation Area into the NRA. Fantastic work that they've done. So they're doing a lot of work to bring back the upper reaches of Mill Creek, which have been hammered by logging, and we appreciate that. I also need to mention Friends of Del Norte, which does amazing work throughout the county, very small and scrappy organization that is responsible for a lot of the protected status of lands there. So thank you to those organizations. Here we have the confluence of the South Fork and the Middle Fork. Oops. And here we have the North Fork and Stony Creek and our property there in the rectangle. And here is that Josephine ophiolite. You can see how different that is. Also need to give our appreciation to the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. Justin Garwood, the fisheries biologist, has been mapping the coho populations throughout the Smith for the last 3 years. It's a great project. We really appreciate that. And he has found way up in Oregon, in this Josephine ophiolite, an ecosystem that resembles more of what you see in the south part of this picture. And there are the coho. Very interesting. Lots of forests, different kinds of minerals. Very interesting. There's Crescent City, bottom left, not in the Smith River watershed. Here is Lake Earl. That is the largest coastal lagoon on the west coast of the U.S. Here is Pelican Bay State Prison. Here is Rowdy Creek, and we're going to be talking a lot about Rowdy, along with Mill Creek, the two most important salmonid streams on the Smith River. And here's the main stem, of course, and here's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation, the agricultural lands at the mouth of the Smith River, the estuary. The Smith River is a coho salmon stronghold. It's recognized throughout the U.S. as one of the most important salmon streams left, not only because it's so pristine, but because the populations are relatively healthy still. And it's looked at as a seed bank to recolonize other streams up and down the Oregon-California coast once those streams recover. So this is a critically important population. The entire 460,000 acre Smith River is designated a key watershed under the aquatic conservation strategy of the Pacific Northwest Forest Plan. It's the only key watershed that encompasses an entire river basin. It's also a core watershed under the Coho Recovery Plan. It's a salmon stronghold. And UC Davis, Peter Moyle, says that we must provide immediate additional protection to these salmon strongholds, such as the Smith River, and manage the watersheds first and foremost for native fish. And that's a key point here. And that's not what's happening at the estuary, this critical reach. So here is the Smith River plain, which surrounds the Smith River estuary. You can see it a little better here. And the Coho Recovery Plan is very specific. We wish that there was a little more stuff in there that we wanted to get in, but it's not bad. They tell us in the Coho Recovery Plan for the Southern Oregon, Northern California coast that agriculture in the lower watershed and around the estuary has been and continues to be the greatest contributor to loss and degradation of coho salmon habitat. And we got this information in there. We provided, and Smith River Project's previous studies, which we'll go into, provided the National Marine Fisheries Service with a lot of the information that they used on pesticides. And they say that the high pesticide use in the Smith River Plain may be affecting the survival of coho salmon, and we need to reduce the concentration levels of pesticides and sediment reaching the Smith River. Of particular importance are the 5 tributaries to the Smith River that flow into the estuary: Rowdy Creek, Ritmer Creek, Delilah Creek, Yontocket Slough, and Morrison Creek. And we're going to be talking a lot about 3 of these streams. Here's another look at the Smith River Plain. You can see all those polygons. Those are all Easter lily fields. Here is Rowdy Creek, running through the middle. Again, one of the 2 most important salmon streams, coho in particular. Here's the town of Smith River. About 2,000 people live here and in the hills surrounding. And this is Smith River Elementary School. And this is an important part of the origin story because when I was working with the Smith River Project in 2001, I decided to take up some of these people who asked us to look at the estuary and the pesticides that were being used there. And in March of 2001, I drove around and I did indeed find a spray rig. And the winds today, if you're out in the bottoms, the winds were incredibly powerful, 25, 30 miles an hour. That's what the winds were like on this day at my back, taking this picture when they were spraying copper hydroxide and chlorothalonil into this wind, and it was blowing directly into Smith River Elementary School, which is the buildings in the background. Chlorothalonil is a carcinogen, and it contaminates air traveling beyond the field. It is often found drifting into nearby residential neighborhoods. That's its nature. It is a potential groundwater contaminant. It is persistent in soils and acutely toxic to fish, crabs, and frogs. So what I found out then, doing this research, and I had a couple of researchers working with me then as well, was that the North Coast Water Quality Control Board, Regional Board, California, was called in during the early 1980s because they were getting many complaints about foul water in the Smith River Plain from wells. And there were only wells used at that time. There was not a community service district providing the town of Smith River with water. And what they found when they tested these wells was widespread contamination with the pesticides 1,2-dichloropropane and aldicarb. And we're going to be talking about aldicarb in particular as we go along. But 1,2-D, both of them are carcinogens. Both of them are absolutely harmful to human health and to aquatic health. And they found 47 wells that were contaminated in these clusters, including those right next to Smith River Elementary School. And these two, the 160 parts per billion, that's one of the highest 1,2-D contaminated wells in the nation. They found wells that contaminated where they make the stuff. So we don't know what was going on here, except for saturation levels of use or maybe dumping, but really, really bad contamination. Some of the worst in the nation of this carcinogen. So we decided in 2001, 2002, Smith River Project, to look at this situation and to see if any of these wells were still contaminated. And we went out and we gathered water. Well, first we gathered tens of thousands of dollars because it costs a lot of money to test water. We brought in a crew from Petaluma, a mobile lab. We had a free water testing day in the town of Smith River, set up the lab. This went on, for a year. We hired these people. During the free water testing day, the lily growers gathered 150 people to come out and protest the free water testing, including the North Coast Gun Owners Association. And you can see here how close these contaminated wells are to Rowdy Creek, this critically important coho salmon spawning stream. But another point about this picture, this image, is that in 1986, the Water Quality Control Board put out a report naming all of this contamination and how bad it was. Everyone in the county knew about this, and throughout the North Coast, it was a big deal. And then they went away. They didn't do anything about it. A few people got water filters. They helped them get water filters. They went away. No enforcement whatsoever. In 1989, the County of Del Norte granted a new resident who had bought 2 acres and wanted to start an organic farm a permit to reopen an existing well without telling him that it was contaminated. Guess where it was? Right there. Incredible, right? And so we tested his water in 2002, and it was still contaminated with 5.6 parts per billion of 1,2-D. Highly carcinogenic level. He'd been drinking in it, bathing in it. Bathing in it's terrible because it off gases in the steam, and you're breathing it into your lungs. He was very angry, as you might imagine. So at that point, Smith River Project commissioned a study from the Center for Ethics and Toxics, who studied the pesticide use in the Smith River Plain from 1996 to 2000. They looked at metamsodium and 1,3-dichloropropene. And what they found was that these two pesticides, 1,3-D having replaced 1,2-D, which was phased out, were used at twice the level of any other county in California, which is really saying something. California is a pesticide-achieving state. And metamsodium, you may remember, spilled into the Sacramento River in 1991, killing all aquatic life for 45 miles until it diluted in Lake Shasta. So knowing this, we worked for years to get the Water Board to conduct surface water testing of streams that feed the Smith River estuary. And this finally occurred in 2010. Again, Siskiyou Land Conservancy absorbed Smith River project in 2004, and these are pesticide barrels, by the way, plastic. So the Water Board came up and they took 4 water samples in 2010. This is from 02, and the Water Board followed up our testing in 02, by the way. They had to confirm whether our testing was accurate. It was. They found contaminated wells, 1,2-D, and aldecarb as well. So in 2010, they took 4 water samples, 2 above and 2 below lily growing. And what they found, one of the first things they found was copper levels were 28 times higher than state law allows. They also found chronic reproductive toxicity in one of the streams, Delilah Creek, where it ran through the lily field, meaning that Cereodaphnia dubia, the water flea, which is the basis of the salmonid food chain, these little invertebrates, could not reproduce in that water. It's very serious. Crispin Sedich, again, our toxicologist, said at the time, if cereal cannot reproduce in your watershed, you can say that salmon habitat is likely impaired. Under the Clean Water Act is what he was talking about. And you can imagine what it would mean to list the Smith River as impaired under the Clean Water Act. That's a big deal. It means that waters are too polluted or degraded to meet water quality standards. Again, one of the cleanest rivers in the world. So, in addition, I wanted to point out that right here, this is Tillis Slough, okay? Here's Delilah Creek. And Delilah Creek, this is where they found the copper and the chronic reproductive toxicity. And Tillis Slough, we're not just talking about salmon. We're talking, of course, about people and all kinds of species. But Tillis Slough contains the northernmost population of tidewater goby, which has the highest level of protection under the Federal Endangered Species Act. It's listed as endangered. And all this stuff is feeding Tillis Slough, the last large off-channel habitat left on the Smith River estuary. So the toxins are transported through the creeks that feed the estuary and also through these ditches and also through groundwater. And we found that out recently, and I'm going to tell you about that. First, let's look at the copper. In 2010, copper hydroxide and copper sulfate, both class 1, the worst kind of copper products you can use. Some organic farmers use copper. This is not organic copper. 30,000 pounds were used in 2010. And copper is highly toxic to fish. Even at recommended rates of application, the materials may be poisonous to trout and other fish. And that actually goes for the copper used on the organic stuff as well. But this, again, is highly pernicious, travels through the system very readily. National Marine Fisheries Service says copper can affect the ability of juvenile salmonids to avoid predators and affect behavior, growth, and primary production of salmon. So in 2012, copper went up by 5,000 pounds of use. Lots and lots of copper. But copper is still only 10% of the total pesticide use in the Smith River plain. So 2013, we finally got the Water Board back up. So far the Water Board did 3 testing events. All 3 turned up significant toxicity at the estuary of one of the world's most important salmon streams. And we're getting no action whatsoever. In 2013, they went back out. They tested 2 places in Tillis Slough and 1 in Delilah Creek, which is the feeder stream there. They tested in 2 places on Rowdy Creek and 1 here on Morrison Creek. What they found was chronic reproductive toxicity. Again, the water flea cannot reproduce in this water. Here on Delilah Creek, here on Rowdy Creek, and here at the mouth of Morrison Creek. And here at the mouth of Rowdy Creek, they found acute reproductive toxicity, meaning that if you were to take a water flea and drop it in that water, it would die. That's really toxic water. So again, copper is only 10% of pesticide use. The reason that copper comes up now is because in those samples that caused that reproductive toxicity, there was no copper found. So it wasn't the copper that was doing it. Copper can do that, but it wasn't in this case. A Water Board staffer who was overseeing the testing said to me after I got these results from them, And by the way, they still have not released these results. We got a draft report. They said you cannot release it to the public. They sat on it for 6 months. We all sat on it for 6 months. This group that was working to create a permit, which is a whole other story, for the lily growers. And they hadn't released it, and we wanted it to go into the Coho Recovery Plan, the final draft of which was coming out in October. And so in September, we released it to the California Coastal Commission, which had a meeting up there. And we felt that was very important. It still didn't make the final draft. They were very upset with us. But one of the main points of impetus that got me to just, okay, we got to release this, is what the staffer at the water board said, we're seeing some chronic toxicity, but we don't know why. We need to get an idea of what's causing this toxicity. I just wanted to shake him by the collar. And so they did this. In total, in 2012, this is the last year that numbers are available, Del Norte County Easter lily growers used 297,000 pounds of highly toxic pesticides, almost 300,000 pounds, on about 600 acres to grow 95% of the US and Canadian supply of Easter lily bulbs. This is 1 year ago this Sunday in Manhattan, and ended up in a church on Easter Sunday, just coincidentally. Hey, let's go look at that church. And there they were, Easter lilies. So the other thing that made it so infuriating that the water board functionary could say that to me about wondering what is causing the toxicity is in those 2013 results, they found pesticides. They found several pesticides in the water that they tested. So let's look at some of these. Hexachlorobenzene, that's a fun one. We don't know where that comes from. There is an old mill up off of Rowdy Creek. It could be from an old mill up there. But it also is a byproduct of pesticide manufacturing. So we don't know where that comes from, but it's a carcinogen, a liver toxin. It's toxic to everything. It bioaccumulates in the aquatic food chain. It was banned in the United States in 1965. That's how bad it is. You know, you got to be bad to be banned in 1965 in the US. So another one, simazine, bad shit. Benpro, whatever, you know, I can't even say that. And then those are not listed as ever being used in Del Norte County, according to the Department of Pesticide Regulation, who we're going to deal with here in a minute. So the pesticides that have in the past or continue to be used in the Smith River on the lily bulbs that they found in the waters include lindane, ethoprop. These are all very, very toxic. Carbaryl, captan, carbofuran, diuron, and aldicarb. Now, aldicarb is very important because it was phased out in Smith River in 1993. That's one of the chemicals they found in the 80s throughout those wells. And they found it in the surface waters, which means that it's still in the groundwater, it's perking through, and it's getting into the surface waters. And this is critically important because lily growers today still use a number of known groundwater contaminants. And when I said that to the water board guy who told me that about we don't know why, I said, well, they use a lot of known groundwater contaminants, which is a term, you know, if you look at Pesticide Action Network, they use that. And he says, I don't really know what that means. I've never heard that term. I'm like, okay, you've never heard the term, but it's kind of self-evident too, what it means, right? And so this is the kind of response we get from the water board. And another thing, I think I should back up a little bit because I'm going to be really down on the agencies here because they kind of deserve it. They're really not, nobody's doing anything about this. But there are some really good people at all of these agencies, and I talk to them. And the ones who are really upfront and honest will say, hey, you cannot believe the wall we're up against on some of these things. So that's very important to point out. Don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. People's hands are tied, and then sometimes people tie their own hands knowing, you know, what the response will be from their superiors, if you'll pardon the expression. So yeah, aldicarb, very important that they found that. And then I said, well, I looked at the list of what they tested for. You know, you have to test specifically for things to see if they're there. I said, did you test for 1,3-dichloropropene or metamsodium? No, they didn't test for those. And those are the two heaviest used pesticides, and 1,3-D is a known groundwater contaminant. And the guy said, I'm not going to use his name, I've kind of viewed them as less of a priority. The lily growers tell them, we have trouble keeping this stuff in the ground. Well, I'm sorry. They have, you still should test for the shit, okay? All right, so let's look at then what they didn't test for. 1,3-dichloropropene, right? 115,930 pounds used in 2012. All right, it is a known groundwater contaminant. It's a carcinogen, it's a reproductive toxin. It means your babies can be born deformed, and that has happened in Smith River. The groundwater contaminant, as mentioned, and it's deadly to aquatic species at very low concentrations. Metamsodium, the other one they didn't test for, 131,913 pounds in 2012. It's a carcinogen, a mutagen. It causes nerve damage and asthma. Its breakdown product is MITC, which kills invertebrates at very low levels, and that's very important because we're seeing the invertebrates go away. Of course, metamsodium is what spilled into the Sacramento River. MITC is a potential groundwater contaminant. Metamsodium itself is not considered a groundwater contaminant, but its breakdown product is, and they pump the stuff into the ground. They inject it into the soil. It's very key. It's not just they're spraying it on top. They're injecting it and covering it with plastic. So let's look at some of the other pesticides used. This is the fun part, right? Chlorothalonil in 2012, 3,700 pounds. It's a carcinogen, reproductive toxin, potential groundwater contaminant. It's persistent in soils. It's acutely toxic to fish, crabs, and frogs. Diuron, 1,100 pounds. Bad stuff. Disulfiton, 2,000 pounds, causes nervous system damage, convulsions, it can put you in a coma, kills aquatic life, and it's a groundwater contaminant. Borate, 2,000 pounds just about, convulsions, breathing problems. It is a groundwater contaminant as well. It's extremely toxic to birds, fish, and aquatic organisms. Ethoprop, I don't know where they get these names, 1,500 pounds. It's a carcinogen, a reproductive toxin. There's nervous system damage, groundwater contaminant. And I'm a little ahead of you, sorry. And at this point, people ask, well, what can I do? All right. Well, there's enforcement, right? Now, what we really need people to contact U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Marine Fisheries Service, State Department of Fish and Wildlife, the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, the County Board of Supervisors in Del Norte, the Del Norte County Ag Department, and say, this has to stop, okay? And we need to make clear right now, I need to make clear to you that Siskiyou Land Conservancy supports farmers. Part of our mission is to support farmers and stay in farmland. We like farmers. There's a huge organic operation just south, Alexander Dairy. We buy their eggs at home. You probably buy their milk if you buy organic milk. They own several thousand acres. That is the alternative. Organic Easter lilies, or at least IPM, they're trying to transition. We would support that. We have talked with Jared Huffman, before that, Mike Thompson, our members of Congress, about getting Farm Bill money for transitioning for the Easter lily growers. And they both were receptive to that, especially Mr. Huffman. I appreciate that. So that's on the table for us. We would support that and work for that so that the farmers, because it's a 3 to 4 year turnaround before you can get income from a bulb crop. And we understand that. The lily farmers are not bad people. They're kind of stuck. But there's a big price for them being stuck. And we're not willing to let that price be paid by the aquatic habitat of the Smith River estuary. So, so enforcement. Okay, this is it's just incredible. In March of 2015, that's just last month, wasn't it? The California Department of Pesticide Regulation, and I'm just kind of getting to the heart of the problem here, okay? CDPR regulates pesticide use in California. And they gave an Integrated Pest Management Award to the Easter Lily Research Foundation for adopting a number of practices to reduce their pesticide use by about 50% over the last 20 years. There was actually not even a reporter, a photographer for a paper who sent me this. None of the reporters who got this, they all got it. Nobody contacted anybody about this. Oh, they got an award. I almost fell out of my chair. I have not seen anything this Orwellian, since I talked to a State Board of Forestry member in 1986 who told me it was okay for Maxam to log the last of the redwoods because the old growth redwoods are, quote, a biological desert. And I thought about that when I saw this. A biological desert, first of all, that's redundant, right? Desert is biological. And what the hell are you saying anyway? These people drive me crazy. So, and then, well, we knew this was wrong. I've been doing this for 14 years. It's utter bullshit, right? So, pesticide use increased 65% in that time period that they cited. From 1992 to 2012, it went from 180,000 pounds to 297,000 pounds. And they got an award for reducing it during that time period by 50%. So I put in this whole quote because I got an email. We just got on these guys at DPR. And so Mark Robertson, a PhD at DPR, sends an email, says, "You are correct." This is worth reading the whole thing. I'm sorry, I got to do it. That there has not been a 50% reduction in pesticide use over the last 20 years. The error in the press release has been corrected. The error was caused by the inadvertent condensation of two unrelated sentences from the organization description that was used as the basis of the press release. Yeah, it's really great. And anyway, they also said in the press release that the growers, little growers, have dedicated huge commitments of time, research, and determination to effectively control pests without harming the environment. And this was after 4 out of 4 testing results by the state agency in charge with checking out water quality found real significant harm to the environment, right? This is pretty Orwellian stuff. You don't see this kind of thing very often. I mean, it was kind of exciting, right? So who the hell is CDPR? Well, we just go to the website and find out. Here it is. And we found out that 2/3 of their budget comes from pesticide sales. That tells you a lot. I didn't know that until all this started happening. It was kind of a gift, you know? And, you know, my response was, well, you know, fox in the hen house, right? 2/3. I mean, what state agency is going to put itself out of business? Sorry, you can't use pesticides. You know, we don't have a budget. Got to go away. We'll do something else. I'll take up macrame. So in any case, what about the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board? They found all that toxicity, right? 4 testing events since 1982, significant contamination in all of them. No enforcement of the Clean Water Act. That's what they're for. They're supposed to enforce the Clean Water Act, monitor and enforce. Nothing. In 1987, 2 years after, or maybe a year, I can't remember, it was 85 or 86, but after the report came out on the toxicity in all those wells, significant, nationally significant toxicity. Right after that, the Water Board issued the lily growers a conditional waiver to continue business as usual. They didn't have to do anything. They were handed a waiver. Okay? And then in 2003, this is thanks to Sharon Duggan. She dug this up for us, our attorney. All conditional waivers were suspended, and the state required all ag lands to obtain discharge permits. The lily growers do not have a discharge permit. I don't know if you can say that they have been operating illegally since 2003, but it kind of looks like it, right? They do not have a permit. And right now, the Water Board is supposedly working on it. We've been in this process with them for 3 years, and it's going nowhere. They say now, okay, maybe 2017, we might have something. That's the latest from the Water Board. We haven't had a meeting in a year. Last time we had a meeting, it was a disaster. They took the lily growers out of the meeting. They met with them separately, right? Everybody thought, well, this isn't going anywhere. And then they contact us 9 months later and say, hey, we've got a draft permit we're going to send you. Are you kidding? So we haven't got it yet, and that was 3 months ago. So we don't know what's going on with them. What about other state and federal agencies charged with protecting wildlife and humans at the Smith River estuary? There are a lot of them. I just mentioned them. And, you know, they're kind of asleep at the wheel. And again, I want to go back to, there's a lot of good people in these agencies, right? There's a lot of self-censorship, though, too. You know, there's a lot of job protection. You know, you got kids in college, whatever. You know, nobody really wants to hit that ceiling and say, you've got to stop, right? I did have an enforcement guy from NIMS after the 2013 results came out call me up and say, I want to do something about this. You know, he's really, you know, he's got a lot going on. He has a huge territory. And he says, I want to go out there and I want to find a dead salmon that has pesticides in it. And I really appreciate, he was really into it, but that's not how it works with pesticides. And everybody should know that at these agencies. You don't just go out and find a dead salmon on the side and then it's a take under the Endangered Species Act because it has pesticides in it. They, you know, their sense of smell goes away. They don't seek cold water. They don't try to get away from predators. They can't find their natal stream, you know. And then, of course, their food is gone. And they just go away. You don't find the corpse with pesticides. It's insidious, and they should know that. I really appreciated him calling me, but he was a little off base. So let's go back to what can I do? What we're looking at doing is informing church leaders and parishioners, friends and family, to buy only organic salmon-safe Easter lilies. This is something the word we want to get out is that we support the Easter lily farmers. We really do, but not at the expense of the aquatic ecosystem. So let's transition, okay? Let's make it so you can grow your bulbs and you can get more money for them. People will spend a little more money for an Easter lily that says on it, salmon safe. Let's do that. It's happening all over the world right now. You can do it too. We want Del Norte County residents to speak up. It's not easy up there, as people know. Now, it's a little bit of a closed society. There's only 35,000 people in the whole county. But we need, if you know someone or if you're from Del Norte, it's important that people start at least talking among themselves. This is a national issue, and it's in your backyard. Letters to the editor, social media, etc. Sign our list back there. We're going to have this presentation available for distribution. It'll be online. We can send you the link. That's going to be a very effective way to get it out, I think. We also take this presentation around the state. I've been at a couple of colleges with it. It goes over pretty well. I want to take it to church groups, frankly, and other people who might be interested in this great watershed in their wild backyard. And if you can, maybe give us your support. Now that we've hired a couple of attorneys and a toxicologist, we need it more than ever. There's some envelopes in the back. I want to go back to the celebration of the river to end up with that, because you get out of the estuary and there it is, this glorious, beautiful, fecund, wild ecosystem. And you can feel it when you're there. You can just sit out of this boat, and it's, there's a 30-foot pool right to the right of that, and it's everywhere on the Smith River. And it's pure, and it needs to have a pure estuary as well. The salmon deserve it. We deserve to have that as well, the people living there. So that is the end of the presentation, and I thank you very much for coming, and I'll take some questions if you like. Yeah, in the back. Are there any salmon-safe lilies being grown without the pesticides? Not that I know of. There is somewhere, and I haven't found out yet where, 5%. This is 95% of the US and Canadian production of Easter lily bulbs. They send the bulbs all around and they're grown into flowers elsewhere. So there's another 5% somewhere else. I haven't located that 5% yet. Maybe it doesn't exist. It might be 100%. But we want consumers to let the Easter lily growers know, especially with their pocketbook, because that's kind of what we've come to. We don't really want to harm their sales. We really don't. We want them to thrive. If they were to transition to an organic production and they made twice as much money, we would celebrate that. We'd buy them a beer, But I don't think there's any right now. Yes, what is a discharge permit, and what does it mean to get one, and what does it do? What we're looking at right now is the Water Board is trying to create what they say is a tiered system of monitoring and control over various agricultural operations. It used to be we were meeting about all the North Coast, Humboldt and Del Norte and part of Trinity, and they've pulled out the Easter lily growers, which we appreciate, because it's a whole different thing up there. And ostensibly, the lily growers would be put in the Tier 3, which would be the highest level of monitoring and maybe the biggest setbacks of spraying from the stream. So there'd be like a 100-foot setback from the stream and maybe monthly monitoring. Two problems with that is the monitoring they're talking about, the Water Board, is self-monitoring. Lily growers would do it themselves. As I said, well, if you can hardly get up there, if you can only get up there twice in 4 years to do surface water testing, how are you going to do this every month? They said, oh, the lily growers do it themselves. Perfect. And then the other thing is setbacks don't mean much, as we're seeing the injection of these pesticides into the soil are getting into the groundwater and getting into the surface waters, as was proven by the 2013 testing results. Proven. And so we're not interested in setbacks. We're not interested in these Band-Aid approaches. We're interested in a wholesale reduction and then elimination of pesticides on the Smith River Plain. We have a zero tolerance policy. And I talked to another ED at another environmental organization who they're trying to decide whether they should get involved. And I said that you need to know from us that we would like to work with you, but we do have a zero tolerance policy about the pesticides. They have to go. I'm sorry, but they just can't be allowed to continue spraying like this when it is clearly and adversely affecting the last great salmon stream in California and one of the most important on the west coast of the U.S. Joyce, and then in the back. All right. So the question is, there must be economic political pressure on the water board to keep from enforcing. And if there is, in fact, a greater economy in the fishing industry, why isn't there pressure from fishing industry and others, especially, I would say, in the county? And that's a very good question. The first part about the water board, I'm not exactly sure what it is that keeps the water board from enforcing Clean Water Act in these clearly enforceable situations, except perhaps that if you crack down on pesticides here, you might have to do it elsewhere in California, which, as we know, is not looked on with much favor in the state. Again, pesticides are legion in California. The whole agricultural industry is run on pesticides, and it's a huge industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry just in California. They sell billions of dollars worth of pesticides just in California. Anyway, so I think we should wrap it up. We're supposed to be out here at 8. Thank you for coming. Please sign up if you can. Thank you. Thanks.